here I am. I'm actually in the middle of foraging some cherry blossoms from a tree in our front yard. And it just, it makes me think of all the things that we're told that we should not do, or things that are not for us to do. And whether they're told to us directly or indirectly, we follow them. I grew up upper middle class, suburbia, and I was always indirectly discouraged from this kind of safe, ethical, easy way to forage. Instead, I was encouraged to, when I grow up, buy everything from the store, no matter what it was, no matter how easy it is to obtain by myself. In fact, cherry blossoms are something very exotic to eat in America. And I've always wanted to try it all my life, but it felt forbidden. It felt forbidden to pick flowers in my own front yard. And as I've been playing with these blossoms and foraging them, it reminded me of when I was researching medieval life, particularly how it would have been for people with my disabilities. Now, I have over 10, but I was specifically at the time researching how it would have been for someone who would now be diagnosed with ADHD. And my findings were that, for a peasant, some of the social difficulties could ostracize them, of course, but our brain types actually steer us in particular directions for many different types of work, especially foraging, as well as specialty crafts. And I always kind of had that in the back of my mind. Whether or not that was true, I obviously could never know because I was too busy doing nothing and not not ever foraging or anything like that. But as I've been plucking these flowers, I'm understanding what they mean. I find that my ADHD helps me to not just see what's right in front of me, but the entire picture all at once. And so no stone goes unturned. And every new blossom is a new delight that spurs me on to collect the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It's like little bits of dopamine trailing me on and on. And it made me realize that even though we live in a very fast society that seems to be completely tailored to ADHD, it's not. It's just not. It's not fast because it's specifically trying to cater to our brain type. It's fast to optimize productivity. And when there is no time, there is no patience. And when there's no patience, there's none given to a friend. Because why are they so special? Everyone needs patience. So people who have certain deficits might arguably need it more than others in certain specific situations, are just told to suck it up, because so does everyone else. And it made me think about how brainwashed I was to look right at my brain type's calling and look away. And, I've had this said many times to me, like, oh, you're so smart, you're so well-read. I don't see you as learning disabled. And I understand that. I really do. Learning disability, it doesn't mean that I learn badly. I just learn differently. And when the different way that you learn is contrary to the way that you are taught, and the only way things are allowed to be taught, you become disabled. You become ostracized, ridiculed, fall behind, and just generally neglected. That is disabling. Even if it has nothing to do with my intellect, my educational prowess, my motivation, my curiosity, or my ability to understand complex concepts. Because what they don't see is how hard it took me to get to where I am. I get my knowledge from video essays on YouTube and audiobooks. They say I'm well-read, but not in a literal sense. Is that true for me? And you just saw me try to save myself because I just switched my sentence around. I meant to say that it wasn't true for me in a literal sense. And that's one of the subtle ways that my dyslexia comes into play that is not really noticed by the people around me. And yet it still jabs at my credibility when I speak. Well, my credibility to people who don't understand complex concepts and don't want to listen to them. That's what they latch onto. The simple concepts. But we live in a society that's geared away from the means of production, geared away from our neighbors. At least that's my society. That's my neighborhood. That's my upbringing. I'm not friends with my neighbors. My neighbors aren't friends with me. I tried very hard when I was younger, but it did not work. I would always ask my mom, can we make this at home? Can we pick this? Can we forage that? And she would say, well, let's let the other people do all the work. Let's leave it to the professionals. They know how to do it. It was not until I looked up how to forage did I realize all you needed were hands. So, yeah. The most simple things are made out to be this hard, dangerous labor that takes a whole afternoon, that is so boring, and you would never do this as a hobby, so you better watch Netflix instead. You better, watch a bunch of advertisements riddled into your TV shows. You better buy the latest toy. You should never forage on your own property. You should never do something free that will end up saving you money. You know, it's interesting. I found out today that I love foraging. But, sorry, to go back to the point I was trying to make to your very ADD brain about when people don't really see me as learning disabled and there's cognitive dissonance. What I wish they understood was that, what they're saying is, like, you're not 100% disabled. Your learning isn't 100% bad. You're actually doing really well for yourself. And what I always want to say to them is that there is no one that is 100% disabled. I mean, what does that even mean? Disabled is, it's more than a diagnosis. It's an experience. It's, when I think of learning disability, yes, I think of all the see me after class marks I got on my spelling tests, and I, think about how I struggle with coding, and even though I like it, I struggle with it. I think about my struggles with education, but I also think about all the friends that I've made that all coincidentally have, like, the same disorders that I have, and how they're the best friends I could have asked for. And would I have those friends if I was not the kind of person who would get along with them the way I do because of the way my brain is formed? Sympathy is one thing, but getting someone is something different. I give them that. Every time we're with each other. I think of the history of learning disability. I think of how, in the medieval era, fool was not only a diagnosis, but it was an occupation. The job of the fool was split into two parts. There were fools who were natural fools, i.e. they had a diagnosis, and then there were artificial fools, jesters, who attempted to mimic what we do naturally. A cheap replica of what I was born with. Natural fools were loved by the king. Regardless of how you see that love, as love for a fun toy or genuine respect and admiration, of course that would vary from king to king and interpretation to interpretation. But fools were essentially given the respect and accommodation of nobles, simply for what we're born with. Fools were seen as more than just quote-unquote learning disabled. It was more than that. Honesty, articulation, humor, brutal honesty. In fact, we were given the privilege to say whatever we wanted to the king without threat of lashing or execution. Although there are some cases in which that happened when the fool went too far. But for the most part, we were given a privilege no one else was, because the king trusted us to keep him humble, grounded. Because who better than someone neurologically wired to tell it like it is? History is not as simple as things were bad then, but now it's perfect, and all of the bigotries are illegal, and anything like that. It was honestly much more complicated than that. And though it was still god-awful to be disabled in the medieval era, it was also different. I mean, does the U.S. president have a fool? I mean, don't answer that. Don't answer that question. Anyways, actually, I don't know what else to say. Yeah, I think I'm done now. Bye.